Ohai. Tuvalu, the Pacific state in Polynesia. Tuvalu is located on 5 atolls and 4 islands of the archipelago of Tuvalu. Islands are scattered on 350 km. Distances between the neighboring islands are located in the range from 50 up to 100 km. The total area of Sushi minus 26 km. The population of the country minus 11206 people. 2011 assessment. The capital, Funafuti. The island of Tuvalu were opened by the Spanish seafarer Alvaro Mendana de Neira in 1568. In 1892 the archipelago became the British protectorate the Ellis Islands, and in 1916, a part of the British colony of the Gilbert Islands and Ellis. On a referendum of 1974 the Polynesian population of the Ellis Islands voted for separation from the Melanesian Gilbert Islands. Kiribati subsequently. Next year the archipelago became separate British colony of Tuvalu. Independence of the island was gained in 1978. Tuvalu, the member of the Union, South Pacific Commission and the Pacific Islands Forum. The archipelago received the modern name only in 1975, and in translation from the Tuvalu language it means, "it standing together." It traditionally inhabited islands of Tuvalu mean. The 9th Nulakita was occupied relatively recently. The European pioneer of islands, Alvaro Mendana de Neira, called the archipelago Lagane Islands, and in 1819 he received the name Ellis Islands, which was used almost all colonial era. The Polynesian state of Tuvalu represents a congestion from the atolls and islands located in the Pacific Ocean. It is a little to the south of the equator. The capital of the country, the city atoll of Funafuti, it is located in 1050 km to the north from the city of Suva, the capital of Fiji, and in 4000 km to the northeast from Sydney, the largest city of Australia. The next archipelagos, the Gilbert Islands belonging to the Republic of Kiribati and located to the northwest from Tuvalu, and the Wallis and Futuna Islands lying to the southeast and belonging to France. The area of Tuvalu Sushi is only 26 km. While the area of the territory occupied with lagoons, more than 494 km. The country was located on 5 atolls. Nanumea, Nui, Nukulala, Nukafo, Funafuti. 3 low coral islands. Nanamanga, Nulakita, Niuta. And 1/2 reef island. Vaitup. Stretched from the northwest for the southeast on 595 km, the largest island of the archipelago. At the rate of the area of Sushi, but not a surface of the water of a lagoon. The atoll of Vaitupu is 5.09 km. And the smallest Nulakita, 0.4 km. All islands are low, and atolls generally consist of several islands, or to the spendthrift, which are subject to negative impact of coastal abrasion. Mainly west sides of islands turn to the ocean. The highest point of the country reaches only 5 m. The most northern island of Tuvalu is the atoll Nanumea, and the most southern Nulakita. The smallest distance between 2 islands of the archipelago makes 67 km. Nukafo/Vaitup. And the greatest minus 172 km. Nui/Vaitup. 5 of 9 islands of Tuvalu, atolls. Other islands represent the lifted atolls. According to Charles Darwin's theory, formation of atolls resulted from immersion of volcanic islands at which surface corals gradually grew. There was a formation of the bordering reef, and subsequently a barrier which was gradually built on by corals. The land of the atoll resulted. Growth of corals and seaweed went most actively in the regions of a reef turned to the ocean. As a result, these outer edges of a reef kept up with subsidence of the volcanic island. Internal areas of the island, on the contrary, plunged underwater. Subsequently, in these parts there was a formation of shallow lagoons. On a surface of reef sand which was formed under the influence of waves and currents, especially during strong inflows, and olive gradually collected. In a tidal zone of the beach, the coastal breed, external inclined layer was formed of stones. As a result, land plants had a support on which they could grow. On the island, resistant to the high content of salts, vegetation in the soil which fastened with the roots various sedimentary rocks and interfered with the water and wind erosion, was formed. Sandy islands, or to the spendthrift, the atoll were so formed. The lifted atoll represents the lifted volcanic island formed as a result of raising of the coral platform, or a maquette which surrounds the volcanic plateau in the center of the island. Low, the island of Tuvalu tower over water level no more than on 5 m, therefore at increase in global sea level they are threatened by flooding. The climate of Tuvalu, hot tropical, is under the influence of southeast trade winds. 2 seasons stand out clearly: rainy season and season of droughts. The damp season, in a period of which about 60% of rainfall dropout lasts from November to April, and droughty, from May to October. The average annual amount of precipitation makes about 3000, though this figure can sometimes reach 4000. Thus, climate to Tuvalu more damp than on the Gilbert Islands and the Fiji Islands located to the south, located to the north. On northern islands of the country, climate more droughty than on southern, and they are more subject to droughts which can continue up to 3 months. Air temperature for all year remains high, varying from 26 to 32 C. The island of Tuvalu lies in a zone of trade winds of a southwest part of the Pacific Ocean, on border of the equatorial zone of Cons. The prevailing directions of wind, from the northeast to the southeast. East/southeast winds prevail from May to October. Tuvalu is subject to negative impact of tropical cyclones which often reach destructive force. For example, as a result of the BB cyclone, almost all inhabited constructions on islands were destroyed. More than 90% of trees were dumped, and the remaining 10% were strongly damaged. 2 persons died. 2 ships ran aground. Only thanks to financial support of the foreign states to Tuvalu it was succeeded to restore the former infrastructure destroyed by a cyclone. A considerable threat to the future of the country is posed by global warming, including the related increase in global sea level, as a result of which low islands not higher than 5 m can appear underwater. During the period from 1993 to 1999, oceanic waters annually attacked the land with a speed of 22 m, and in 1995, 14 that considerably exceeded universal indicators. Among other negative effects of climate change, coastal erosion, and erosion of the bordering reefs, the saliferous intrusion, the shortage of drinking water, deterioration in a condition of groundwaters, and economic situation in the country, including threat to agriculture, increase in risks for health of the population. The bad vital conditions on the main island of the country of Funafuti caused by growth of the population of the atoll, unrest in land use, deficiency of drinking water and some other factors only aggravate a present situation. In case of real threat to the population of Tuvalu, plans for evacuation of the population, probably to New Zealand, Australia or Fiji, are considered. Nevertheless, not all scientists share the point of view about fast flooding of the archipelago, widespread among the public and in many respects the warmed-up SME. It agrees to one of opinions: increase in global sea level near Tuvalu can be a temporary phenomenon which is defined climatic, oceanographic, geological and some other parameters. Besides, change of a coastal strip to the spendthrift of atolls differs in high dynamism. The land receding before the ocean in one part of the island, can grow in another. That was noticed, for example, on the island of Vaitupu. Soils of Tuvalu have coral origin. Soil is generally created from residues of reef materials, corals, limy seaweed, foraminifera and mollusks. Therefore, structure of local soils generally carbonate. They differ in high alkalinity, porosity, because of what very badly detain moisture, and low fertility. At the same time, the fertility depends on several factors. First of all, contents and proportions of organic materials and also shares of coral material. Amount of mineral substances in soils of Tuvalu low, except for calcium. On islands are also available phosphatic. Were created from a dung of seabirds and humus soils. The last in places of mangrove thickets. Because of the small area, low altitude and porosity of soils on the islands of Tuvalu, there are no rivers. Instead, water, filtering through the earth, forms a lens of slightly saltish water. Therefore, locals are forced to collect rainwater from roofs and to store it in concrete tanks. In the past, islanders received water for economic needs from the dug wells, but because of penetration of salty sea water and sewage into underground lenses, groundwaters were polluted. Flora of atolls is quite monotonous. It is connected with the fact that the considerable part of the land of islands is set with coconut palms and other food plants. On coast, Heliophilus and Sevilla turnfortune, a pandanus grow. In internal parts of islands, ferns, from which large Asplenium nidus are distinguished. A Canavalesia, mangrove thickets, other shrubby vegetation, groves of coconut palms, breadfruit trees, plantations of bananas. Often broadleaf breeds of trees, and Ocrozea, a Gatarda and others meet. In total to Tuvalu 86 species of vascular plants, from which 44 are local or registered. Any of them isn't an endemic. The fauna of the country is extremely poor and presented by mainly introduced types. From mammals, pigs, rats, dogs and cats meet. Population of seabirds on islands is insignificant, as traditionally they are caught by locals. On not disturbed by the person, to the spendthrift frigates, cormorants, petrels nest. Land lizards, snakes, overland crabs, crayfish, hermits are widespread. The sea environment of Tuvalu is presented by 6 main types of ecosystems. Oceanic, external reefs, lignite reefs, lignite bottom, the isolated reefs and natural channels connecting oceanic and lignite waters. In total, about 350 species of fish and 30 types of corals live in coastal waters. The early history of the archipelago is studied very badly. The island of Tuvalu were, presumably, populated in 300–500 years of our era with natives from the Tonga Islands and Samoa. Nevertheless, the cave found on the island Nanamanga with traces of a fire can demonstrate that the archipelago was colonized earlier. The Spanish seafarer Alvaro Mendana de Nera, who floated by islands in 1568, became the European pioneer of Tuvalu. The traveler called the archipelago Lignite Islands. Up to the 18th century of Tuvalu remained unnoticed by other seafarers. Only in 1788 the part of islands was opened by the English captains Thomas Gilbert and John Marshall. In 1819 the island of Tuvalu were surveyed from aboard of the Canadian vessel Rebecca, which captain called the archipelago of Ellis Islands in honor of the owner of the ship. In the first half of the 19th century, by-islands began to float whaling vessels, but due to the lack of convenient locations for the mooring of the settlement of strangers weren't based. In the second half of the century on the archipelago, the Peruvian slave traders who from 1862 to 1864 took out to the period from the atolls of Funafuti and Nuku'alofa, over 400 people began to appear often. In 1865 on the islands of Tuvalu the first Christian missionaries from the London Missionary Society landed. In 1892 the archipelago became a part of the British Protectorate the Ellis Islands, and in 1916, a part of the British colony of the Gilbert Islands and Ellis. In the years of World War II on the islands of Tuvalu the military base of Ellis was located. In 1974 on the archipelago the referendum by results of which the Ellis Islands were the most part of the population was made by Polynesians separated from the Gilbert Islands on which Micronesians lived mainly was held. Next year the Ellis Islands became the separate British colony of Tuvalu, which gained independence in 1978. In the administrative relation of Tuvalu it is divided into 7 islands: Nanumea, Nuta, Nanamanga, Nui, Vaitup, Nuku'alofa and Nukufo, and 1 city council, Funafuti. According to the last census of 2002 the population of Tuvalu was 9,561 persons, including tourists, temporary workers. Resident population minus 9,359 people. By 2008 this figure increased to people. Assessment. In spite of the fact that rates of increase in population increased from 0.6% in 1991-2002 to 1.577% in 2008, growth of the population of Tuvalu remains rather low against the background of other countries of Oceania. One of the main reasons for it is emigration of the population. In 1960 representatives of the people of Tuvalu, slightly less than 1% of the number of the people of Oceania living in the territory of New Zealand, lived in New Zealand, mainly in the cities of Auckland and Wellington. Diasporas of natives of Tuvalu also are in Fiji.
On the island Kioa, which was rented by inhabitants the islands of Vaitupa after World War II.
Samoa, Kiribati. Generally it is descendants of Tuvalu workers of the island of Banaba. Nauru. Employees of the Nauruanski Phosphatic Company.
Considerable part of the population of Tuvalu lives in the capital and the only city of the country, Funafuti -47%. The internal migration of the population, which is characterized by resettlement of people from the remote islands on the atoll of Funafuti, is one of the top trends noted to Tuvalu.
For example, in 1992 on the atoll 42% of the population of the country, and in 1979, only 29% lived. It creates the increased load of resources and the earth of the island, leads to a coastal erosion, negatively affects a local ecosystem. Growth on 389 people in comparison with 1992. Also Nuku'alofa. Growth on 40 people.
Were the only remote islands where in 2002 growth of the population was noted, to Vaitupa.
On all other atolls depopulation was observed. The most considerable, on the island of Nuku'alofa. The population decreased by 165 people.
The dense population in 2002 was registered on the atoll of Funafuti -1610 people on km.
While over the country this figure made 373 persons on km. The lowest density, on the atoll of Nulakita, 83 persons on km. In 2002 men made 49.3%. 4614 people. Women -50.7%. 4745 people. A share of urban population -47%, rural -53%. Level of natural increase in 2008 was 1.577%. The share of children up to 15 years in 2002, 36.4%, adult population from 15 to 59 years -55%, is more senior than 60 years -8. 6%. Thus, average age of the population was 23.6 years. In 1991, 25.1 years. Average life expectancy of men, according to assessment of 2008, 66.7 years, women -71.36 years. Population of Tuvalu homogeneous. According to a census of 2002, more than 94% of inhabitants were representatives of the indigenous Polynesian people of Tuvalu. 4.6% representatives of mixed marriages of Tuvalu and other people, and only 168 people are 8% were foreigners. First of all, natives from other islands of the Pacific Ocean, from them the majority, representatives of the Micronesian people of Kiribati. Besides English, official language of the country is the Tuvalu language relating to Polynesian languages. And there is a large number of loans from the Samoan language which in the past was used by Christian missionaries. Nevertheless, carriers of two of these languages don't understand each other. The closest language is Toklao. Total number of carriers of Tuvalu in 1998 was about 10670 people. For record of 11 concordants and 5 vowels, the alphabet on the basis of Latin is used.
In total, 7 dialects of Tuvalu, which are divided into 2 dialect zones, are allocated. Northern.
Niuta and Nulakita is widespread on islands Nanumea and Nanamanga.
And Southern.
Official option of language.
It is widespread on the islands of Funafuti, Tuvalu, Nukafo and Nukulala.
In the country there are carriers and other Pacific languages. Samoan and Kiribati. The atoll Nui, which within several centuries was under strong influence of Micronesian culture of the next Gilbert Islands, which soldiers occupied the island in the 17th-18th centuries, is of special interest.
Inhabitants of Nui talk on one of dialects of the Tuvalu language, which is confusion of languages of Kiribati, Tuvalu and Samoan.
The dominating religion on the islands of Tuvalu is the Christianity introduced on the archipelago by Elikan's priest.
English Elikana.
From the island of Manakiki in 1861. Having stayed on the islands of Tuvalu 4 months, the priest went to Samoa to be taught to missionary business. Subsequently Elikana returned on the archipelago, and islands fell within a sphere of influence of the London Missionary Society. In 1969 from this missionary society the Tuvalu Church separated. In 2002 the share of Protestants. Independence of Tuvalu Church. Made 91%. 85-21 persons. Seventh-day Adventist Church -2%. 183 people. They were followed by Veribakay's representatives. 177 people. Assemblies of Brothers. A New Protestant Current, 166 people. On islands other religious trends are also presented, but the number of their supporters is small. On all islands of Tuvalu there are traditional leaders who at the same time are members of Tuvalu Church. The most part of followers of other religions are presented on the atoll of Funafuti. Except for the island Nanumea where the big share of followers of Bakay is registered. Tuvalu, the sovereign democratic state. The constitution adopted on October 1, 1978 establishes the monarchic form of government with the Westminster system of parliamentarism. A number of prime ministers of the country. Sofachusopoanga, Maishatofa.
Were supporters of change of the political system of Tuvalu from monarchic on republican, headed by the president.
Now the country is a part of the British Commonwealth of Nations and the official head of state is the British monarch. However, on the referendum which took place on April 30, 2008 for preservation of the monarchy 1260 people, and only 679, voted for transition to the republic.
Legislature of the country is the unicameral parliament or the Line Fono.
Tuvalu Failai Fono. Also is called Chamber of Assemblies. Consisting from not less than 12 deputies and chosen for a 4-year term. Deputies are elected on the basis of universal suffrage on the majority system of relative majority in multi-mandatory and single-candidate districts. All citizens of Tuvalu who reach 21 years have election rights in deputies of parliament. At the same time there is a number of exceptions at which refuse to candidates registration.
At once after the parliamentary elections, members of parliament from the number elect the speaker. The head of state has the right to dismiss parliament in case there is vacant a place of the prime minister or if during the certain period of time.
It is defined by sensible mind of the head of state. The Prime Minister wasn't elected.
The Parliament of Tuvalu is given the right of the publication of laws which don't contradict the constitution of the country.
Each member of Parliament has the right to submit for consideration the bill, the offer on a debate in Parliament, to submit the petition to Parliament. Is one of forms of responsibility and consultations. All bills after the first reading in Parliament are sent to the local governments or to the Falcopula for consideration and commenting. An exception of this rule are those bills for which the Governor-General of Tuvalu was charged, and also those which have no public importance. In these cases, the Governor-General is obliged to act according to the recommendation of the Cabinet.
According to the Constitution of Tuvalu, the monarch and the head of state is Her Majesty the Queen of Great Britain Elizabeth II. Presidential post is a symbol of unity and originality. Tuvalu.
The head of state is obliged to act only according to the recommendation of the Cabinet, the Prime Minister or other minister who is given the general or special authority of the office. The head of state is presented to Tuvalu by the Governor-General appointed by him on the advice of the Prime Minister. At the same time, the Prime Minister has to consult with other decks of Parliament in advance for a period of 4 years. The person who reached age of 50 years can only become the Governor-General. However, he shouldn't be more senior than 65 years.
The Governor-General performs functions of the head of state if that is outside Tuvalu or in old age, is not capable. Besides the head of state and the Governor-General, who according to the Constitution of Tuvalu are allocated with executive power, there is a cabinet bearing collective responsibility before Parliament for performance of executive functions of the government of the country.
The office consists of the Prime Minister and other ministers, whom has to be no more than 1/3 from the total number of parliamentarians and who at the same time are members of Parliament. One of ministers, apart from the Prime Minister of Tuvalu, is the Deputy Prime Minister, who is appointed the head of state according to the recommendation of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is elected by a ballot members of Parliament from the structure.
The sphere of responsibility of the Prime Minister and other ministers is defined by the head of state, who has to be guided by the recommendations of the Prime Minister.
In general, the Prime Minister is responsible for the Cabinet and Parliament, the constitutional and political affairs, public service, coordination of the government, judicial and legal issues, TV and radio broadcasting and information, police, prisons, a fire service, immigration, religious questions, national elections and foreign policy. The judicial system of Tuvalu includes Legal Committee of Privy Council in London, Court of Appeal, the High Court, and other types of vessels, among them magistrates' courts and island courts.
The High Court of Tuvalu, the Supreme Court of Written Production, Court of First Instance in consideration of criminal and civil cases established by the Constitution.
It consists of the presiding judge and other judges whose number is stipulated by the current legislation.
The presiding judge is appointed the head of state according to the recommendation of the cabinet, other judges, according to the recommendation of the office after consultations with the presiding judge.
The persons who were judges in courts of unlimited jurisdiction on civil and to criminal cases in any of the countries which legislation is similar to the legislation of Tuvalu, or in courts which consider appeals from similar vessels, can only become judges. Also indispensable condition is existence of 5 years practice as a barrister or the solicitor. Enters jurisdiction of the High Court of Tuvalu. Consideration of the questions connected with providing the Bill of the Rights, contained in the Constitution of the country. Questions on membership in Parliament. Other questions connected with interpretation and application of the Constitution. Hearing of appeals on decisions of inferior courts. The Court of Appeal of Tuvalu is engaged in consideration of appeals on decisions of the High Court irrespective of whether it is implementation of the general or appellate jurisdiction. The Privy Council considers appeals on decisions of Court of Appeal. Electoral rights allocate the citizens of Tuvalu who reached 18 years. Have no right to participate in elections of the person, not pardoned sentenced by court of any of the Commonwealth countries of the nations to death or to imprisonment more than 12 months and subsequently. Recognized as the insane. Struck off electoral registers for the insults connected with elections.
In case of imprisonment, the citizen of Tuvalu can take part in elections only 3 years later after release.
The country is divided into 8 constituencies. The districts of Vaitupa, Nanyumia and Utah, Funafuti are represented in Parliament by 2 deputies. Districts Nanamanga, Nui, Nukafo, Nukulala, 1 deputy. The local government on islands was introduced during the colonial period in the mid-60s with the establishment of island councils, island courts and island land courts for the first time. At introduction of this system, the administration didn't attach particular importance to the traditional forms of government at the island level. Therefore, a number of functions which were performed by traditional leaders appeared in jurisdiction of neogenic island councils which, however, didn't hold authority with locals.
Return to traditional forms of local government took place in 1997 when, with adoption of law on the Whakapula, were officially recognized to a Whakapula.
Tuvalu as Whakapula
Are the traditional meetings existing on each island of Tuvalu.
After transfer of a number of functions to them, earlier carried out by local government councils, to the Whakapula received she control over activity and affairs of islands which, in turn, became more independent in the solution of internal questions. In total exists 8 to a Whakapula. On the islands of Vaitupu, Nanamanga, Nanyumia, Utah, Nui, Nukafo, Nukulala, Funafuti, in each of which about 6 people enter. Executive division to a Whakapula or to a copula. Tuvalu Kopul, which perform a number of the functions mentioned in the law except election to a bullet head.
To a copula, approvals of the island budget, resolutions and appointment of the employees working in the capital.
In Tuvalu there are no political parties, though there is an informal oppositional group which consists of people who don't support the government.
In Tuvalu there are no permanent armed forces, therefore maintenance costs of army aren't provided in the budget of the country.
However, in Tuvalu there are constabulary forces, which include divisions on observation of sea space, search and saving missions, prospecting operations enter a task, customs, prison and immigration divisions. Their main objective is maintenance of the law and order, preservation of peace, protection of life and property, prevention and investigation of crimes. In 2007, 81 persons served in police of the country.
The police of Tuvalu are headed by the chief appointed by the Governor-General according to the recommendation of the Commission on Questions of Public Service, which has to consult with the Cabinet in advance.
In 2003 in the country 2345 crimes were committed. In 2002, 2370. From them, reminding identity of the person -1666, thefts -591. Tuvalu maintains diplomatic relations with more than 28 countries including with Taiwan. On September 18, 2011 Tuvalu recognized independence of Abkhazia. On September 19, South Ossetia.
On October 22, 2011 between Tuvalu and the Russian Federation diplomatic relations are established.
Georgia broke off diplomatic relations with the state of Tuvalu on February 16, 2012 because of recognition of the last independence of Abkhazia and South Ossetia.
Earlier diplomatic relations between Georgia and Tuvalu were established in February 2011.
On March 31, 2014 in Tbilisi representatives of Tuvalu signed the Act of Recovery of Diplomatic Relations and withdrew the Act of Recognition of Independence of Abkhazia and South Ossetia.
The only country which has the embassy in the capital of this Pacific state, the city of Funafuti, is Taiwan.
The only diplomatic mission of Tuvalu is located in Fiji. The country also has the permanent representative to the Union and honorary consuls in New Zealand, Australia, Germany, Japan, Great Britain, Switzerland and Taiwan. The main region of foreign policy activity of Tuvalu is the Pacific Ocean. However, in recent years the country began to take active part not only in regional, but also international forums, which main subject is the problem of change of global climate. Tuvalu, the member of the Union. I became the 189th member state on September 5, 2000. The British Commonwealth of Nations, the Secretariat of the Pacific Community, the Pacific Islands Forum, the countries of Africa, the Caribbean region and the Pacific region and other international organizations. Economy. Currency $1 Australian. Odd. Equals 100 cents. 1 Tuvalu dollar equals 100 cents. Only coins are used. Situation in the world. Judging by PPS. The 229th. 2006. DDD. PPS. Of $14.94 million. 2002 assessment. DDD growth of 3%. 2006. DDD per capita. PPS. Of $1,600. 2002 assessment. Inflation of 3.8%. 2006 assessment. Labor 3615. 2004 assessment. Main branches of the national economy: agriculture, tourism. Export of $1 million. 2004 assessment. Main partners: X. Germany, Italy, Fiji. Import of $12.91 million. 2005. Main partners: Fiji, Japan, China, Australia, New Zealand. Budget revenues of $21.54 million. 2006. Expenses of the budget of $23.05 million. 2006.
The characteristics defining an economic situation to Tuvalu differ in nothing from characteristics of other countries of Oceania.
A huge exclusive economic zone, limited natural wealth, remoteness from the main world markets of sale, deficiency of highly qualified specialists. At the same time, major factors which can damage economic stability on islands are the instability of the international investments, decline in income from licensing of vessels, natural disasters and fluctuations in the world markets. Economy on islands, market and natural.
The economic activity focused on the market is generally concentrated in the city of Funafuti, while on the remote islands the economy of natural type prevails.
Tuvalu treats the countries of the fourth world, that is the poorest in the world.
National economy substantially is based on the public sector, making about 60% of GDP of the country.
Primary branches of economy as of 1998 were the state service, 25%, construction, 16%, trade and services of the state enterprises which aren't relating to housing and public utilities, 15%, agriculture and fishery, 13%, basic economic activity, 31%.
Significant monetary receipts are annually carried out through Trust Fund Tuvalu.
English Tuvalu Trust Fund, which is the international foundation which is set up in 1987 by Australia, Great Britain and New Zealand with assistance of South Korea and Japan.
Thanks to investments, the capital of fund increased in 2006 from initial $17 million up to $77 million. Despite existence of a large number of the factors interfering economic development of the country in the economic sphere, certain success which can be explained with several reasons were achieved in recent years. Growth of money transfers from the citizens of Tuvalu working on foreign vessels, good income from issue of licenses to foreign vessels for the right of catch of fish in ease, considerable monetary receipts from sale of the national domain of the top level.
TV. Growth of financial support of the foreign states. According to data of CIA in 2002, DDD of the country was about $14.94 million, and DDD per capita, $1,600. At the same time, his growth for the last decades was very uneven. For example, in 1998 it reached 19%, in 2000, 14%, and in 1996 and 1999 had negative indicators. 1% and 6%.
One of important sectors of economy of Tuvalu is agriculture.
Nevertheless, the low fertility, porosity and also salinity negatively affects development of this industry, especially after high inflows and cyclones. Local soils, many of which are unsuitable for processing. The most part of such lands is concentrated on northern islands of the archipelago, where also more droughty than on the southern islands climate. The main crop is the coconut palm, having the broadest application. Cocos are used by locals in the food purposes and also as a forage for pets, generally pigs. Coconut milk goes for production of alcoholic drink of a tada. Other parts of a plant, first of all, leaves, go for weaving of mats, baskets and other craft products. Wood of a coconut palm serves the major construction material and also firewood. From oily endosperm of nuts of this plant make a copra, the main export goods of the country. However, in recent years her production considerably decreased, mainly because of the low world prices. Other widespread crops are the pandanus, a breadfruit tree, bananas, a papaya. Inhabitants also dig out small holes in which they grow up huge marsh taro. Fish, one of a national wealth of Tuvalu which plays very important role in economy and life of the country and is a basis of a diet of locals. The country has the huge exclusive economic zone, EEZ, which area is km. Thanks to agreements with other states of the world on the right of catch of fish in EEZ, significant cash inflow in Tuvalu is provided. For example, in 2000 the proceeds from issue of licenses were all $9.7 million or 44% of all state revenues. In the ocean mainly are engaged in trade of fishes of family Scumbrievi, especially 18 of types of armor. Patasoeuspalamis.
The main partners of Tuvalu in the sphere of fishery are the USA, Japan and China.
About 15% of adult population of Tuvalu work abroad as seamen on the trade ships, and the money transfers made by them are an important source of income of the country. In 2006 they made about $4 million. In 2002 length of highways of Tuvalu was only 8 km. In the country there is no railway transport. Flights in Tuvalu are made by airlines Air Fiji. Flights from Suva, the capital of Fiji, and Air Pacific. Flights from Nandi, Fiji.
In total in 2007 one airport, the International Airport of Funafuti, worked in the country.
Public transport acts on the island of Funafuti, but the most popular type of transport is the taxi. The only port of the country is the city of Funafuti. Despite the small area of Tuvalu, the fleet of this state makes 74 ships. The press of Tuvalu is presented by only 2 editions.
The newsletter of the government, Sekulia o Tuvalu, is issued in the Tuvalu language. Tuvalu, the English language newspaper, Tuvalu Echoes, is the property of Government Corporation of Media of Tuvalu,
which also possesses the news internet portal, Tuvalu News. One FM station works at Islands. Radio Tuvalu. There are no national television channels in the country.
Locals, nevertheless, use satellite television.
In Tuvalu different types of telecommunication services are available. Telex, telephony, internet. In 2005 in the country in use there were 900 home phone numbers and 1300 mobile phone numbers. In 2002 to Tuvalu 1300 people used the internet.
In the early 90s, in connection with development of the internet among the telecommunication companies, the national domain
TV of Tuvalu was of particular interest. In translation from English television. In 1998 the government of Tuvalu sold it to the Canadian company, Information California, hoping for high income and payment of us $50 million. But soon the transaction was broken off, and the domain was sold to the American company,
TV Corporation International, which was a part of the company subsequently Idealab.
Internet Incubator. The headquarters in California.
According to the new contract, Tuvalu received 20% of shares of the new company and the minimum income in the size of $50 million.
The sum had to be paid within 12.5 years as $1.0 million a quarter. In 2000, the country received an additional lump sum of $12.5 million. But registration potential in the domain was too overestimated, and at the end of 2001 the TV Corporation International sold the domain for $45 million. Other American company, Veris Incorporation, which is engaged in registration of the websites in the domains .com, .net and .org, received additional $10 million for signing of the contract of Tuvalu. According to the new agreement, annual payments of $2.2 million and 5% of annual proceeds from registration in the domain are also guaranteed to the government of the country, and the Veris Incorporation company acquired the rights for the domain till 2016.
Since the beginning of the 1990th on 2000, Tuvalu also handed over the telephone code to 688 various companies specializing in rendering sex services and phone. At the same time, monetary income from the telephone code for the tiny country was rather notable.
In 1999 they were all $3 million. Or $1.6 million. But for the religious and moral reasons, the government of Tuvalu was forced to refuse this source of income. Additional source of replenishment of the state budget are the release and sale of stamps and coins.
The Philatelic Bureau Tuvalu was created in 1978, having become by the beginning of the 1980th years the third largest employer in Tuvalu. The peak of release and sale of stamps in the country belongs to 1980-1981, when income in this sphere was up to 20% of the state budget.
But after attempt of the government to increase volumes of release of brands at the expense of such subjects as world leaders, cars, trains, and football players, the interest of philatelists of the whole world sharply fell. After this, Tuvalu couldn't restore the positions, and now income from sale of brands is much lower than was earlier. The tourist sector of economy of Tuvalu is developed rather badly, and the number of the tourists arriving in the country remains rather low in comparison with other countries of Oceania. Several factors can serve as the reason for that: bad air traffic with other countries of the world and high cost of flights, poor quality of the represented services, including backwardness of the hotel sector, are basic of which. Nevertheless, in Tuvalu there are prerequisites for development of ecotourism. In 2007 islands were visited by 1130 people. For example, in 1998, 1006 people, in 2003, 1377 people. The main flow of tourists goes to the atoll of Funafuti, where the only hotel in the country and other locations of tourists is located. In 2002, 13.46% of GDP of Tuvalu were tourism revenues. The archipelago is mainly visited by citizens of Japan, Fiji, Australia and New Zealand. In 2017, the main articles of export of Tuvalu are not cut frozen fish, $2.01 million, of whom nearly a half from all total revenue, and chemical goods is the share. Paints, $333,000. Polyastals, $175,000. Laboratory reactants, $170,000, etc. The main articles of import of Tuvalu are oil products, $8.41 million, minus 24%, metals and products from them. Dollars $8.94 million, minus 25%. Fishery vessels, $4 million, minus 11%, and tea. Construction materials and various food products and semi-finished products. Main partners in export: Japan, $201 million. France, $892,000. Bosnia and Herzegovina, $201,000. USA, $152,000. And Australia, $126,000. On import, China, $10.8 million. Fiji, $9.8 million. South Korea, $4.78 million. Chile, $2.7 million. And the Republic of South Africa, $1.97 million. The general commodity turnover of Tuvalu in 2017 is estimated at $4.02 million on export and $35.6 million on import. Monetary units of Tuvalu, Tuvalu dollar and Australian dollar. During the period from 1966 to 1976 in the country, only the Australian dollar was in circulation, but since 1976 the Tuvalu dollar, which exists only in the form of coins, was entered. In itself it is an independent currency, but nevertheless has the ISO code 4217. In a money equivalent, the Tuvalu dollar is equated to Australian dollar. On the budget for 2006, expenses made $23.05 million, and income minus $21.54 million. At the same time, expenses of the government of Tuvalu remain very high. The ratio with GDP of the country fluctuated within 150–220% during the period from 1999 to 2003. It follows from this that expenses of the government are the main driving force of economic activity in Tuvalu. It is caused by the fact that the private sector is only in embryo, and hardly it will be able to become the leading sector of economy because of the numerous factors constraining his development. Important source of replenishment of the budget of the country are also stamps, which attract interest of philatelists from around the world. In the country there is no central bank, and the internal banking system of Tuvalu is presented by only one bank, Tuvalu National Bank, which is owned by the government. Even before appearance in Tuvalu of Europeans, the local population was divided into separate groups which had certain rights and duties. Historically, each island of the archipelago was politically independent, though between the atolls of Funafuti, Nukafo, Nukulila and Vaitup the close ties based on honoring of the general ancestor and ritual hierarchy existed. Tuvalu Aliki. Leaders whose power was descended were recognized leaders of traditional society both in political and in religious sense, Aliki. Having huge authority, they directed life of islanders.
According to representations of the people of Tuvalu between the supernatural world and Aliki there was a close interrelation.
In fact, the leader was a shadow of more powerful and imperious being to whom all universe submitted. Any solution of Aliki was final and invariable, therefore each islander was obliged to obey to him, differently punishment up to death could follow.
Confidants and assistants to Aliki called Tauliki. Tuvalu by Tauliki.
They advised the supreme leader concerning housekeeping, informed on possible threats, were intermediaries between inhabitants and Aliki, organized distribution of land and food between community members. The oldest heads of communities used special respect. They could make remarks of Aliki, generally in questions of grocery providing and preparation for war. Often advised him.
Women were engaged in a household, spun mats, baskets, did jewelry.
Each Tuvalisti family, or a Saloga, Tuvalu Saloga, was engaged in a certain matter in community. Someone built houses, someone a canoe, and so on.
The important place in the life of people of Tuvalu is taken by music and dances which are closely interconnected with each other.
The musical Tuvalu style developed throughout several centuries, and it is possible to describe it as a musical microcosm of Polynesia where modern and older styles coexist. Nevertheless, many of musical and dancing traditions didn't remain.
Negative impact in this regard played emergent Tuvalu Christian missionaries who extended among islanders of a song with the religious contents and the European melody and forbade execution of many traditional dances for the ethical reasons.
For example, before emergence on islands of missionaries traditional music was followed by singing which was similar to monotonous reading, but subsequently this tradition disappeared, as well as special songs which were sung by women in operating time of men. The subject of songs was very various. Generally in the everyday life of islanders, their feelings and emotions was reflected. There were also songs on mythological subject. Except entertaining function, two traditional Tuvalisti dances to a Fakana and a Fakasizia had also other importance. They were executed in honor of ruling leaders of the Cause de Star Islanders who succeeded in a canoe construction, fishery, Cause de Star in courage. However, from these two dances I remained only a Fakasizia. Fakana was the sedentary dance which was followed by the movement of hands and the top part of a trunk. It was widespread on the islands of Niuta and Nukafo and was executed mainly by men who sat around.
In the center usually there was a grandfather who was considered as the most skilled performed by dance and being engaged in keeping of a step.
A Niuta dance was sometimes executed sitting on a lap or standing. Despite popularity of Afakanu, the missionaries who arrived to islands considered this dance too erotic and forbade it. The ban was also caused by the fact that Tuafakana had also religious value. Tuvalu Onga, who was executed, was traditional women's dance on the island of Niutaras, or an onger sitting or on a lap. The Fakasizia, unlike a Fakana, is followed by slower melody, and is executed by one or two dancers. Other being present sing or beat time.
The most known type of dance, as well as music of Tuvalu, is Fatal.
Tuvalu Fatal.
In whom strong influence of the European melody and harmony is traced, and the lyricism is the major line.
Dancers at execution Fatal sit in 2 or more rows, so the best of them are in front in the center. A semicircle, facing dancers, men and youth who make chorus sit and beat time, striking with palms on mats. Sometimes even small wooden chests. The small slot hole gong, which was called a nafa, Tuvalu nafa, are a stalemate. Tuvalu paid he less than the size than a nafa, was the only tool which was used for music of dances. Very often the melody turned out thanks to easy blows by fans on palms. At execution of a focuses and Fatal, women and men of chorus strongly beat mats on which they sat thus 2 beats on time, and at execution of aras, clapped. In Tuvalu there is the national team in soccer. However, the national federation isn't included into FIFA, remaining at the same time the Associated Confederate of Soccer of Oceania. The first international match with participation of the national team of Tuvalu on soccer was held on August 29, 1979, in which lost Tuvalu to the national team of the island of Tahiti with the score 0-18. It became the largest defeat of the national team. The national team of Tuvalu won the largest victory over the national team Tonga on August 31, 1979 at the South Pacific Games in Fiji with score 5-3.
In 2007, the national team of Tuvalu became the first national team of the world which isn't entering into FIFA, which participated in elimination games of the FIFA World Cup.
The National Olympic Committee of the country was created in 2004, and the IOC in 2007 is officially recognized. In total in the country there are 11 operating national sports federations, from which 6 are members of the international federations. On badminton, basketball, volleyball, weightlifting, tennis and table tennis.
In 2008, the national team of Tuvalu for the first time participated in the Summer Olympic Games, which were taking place in Beijing.
Though I didn't win any medal, and was presented in easy and weightlifting. The country never participated in the Winter Olympic Games. Holidays. January 1, New Year. Friday before Easter, the Good Friday. The next day after Easter, like Monday. The second Monday of March or other appointed day of the Commonwealth. The Monday following after the second Sunday of May, day of the Gospel.
The second Saturday of June or other appointed day of celebration of anniversary of the monarch.
The first Monday of August, National Day of Children. October 1 and 2, day of Tuvalu. The
second Monday of November or other appointed day of celebration of a crowning of the monarch.
December 25, Christmas. December 26, Day of Gifts. After obtaining independence in 1978, the government of Tuvalu expected to construct on all remote islands high-quality medical institutions, but because of lack of funds, eventually
the decision on concentration of all available resources on modernization of the only large medical object of the country, hospitals of the Princess Margaret.
English Princess Margaret Hospital, located on the atoll of Funafuti, was made. The new modern building of hospital was opened in 2003. Construction was conducted with assistance of Japan.
Outside the capital of Tuvalu there are no constant and private medical practitioners, and all medical services in the country are provided by the Ministry of Health.
Visits of doctors on the remote islands take place seldom that negatively affects human health. Various infectious diseases are the main reason for incidence in Tuvalu. Annually, the disturbing quantity of skin, sharp respiratory and eye infections. Diseases of airways, first of all, flu, cold, are the most widespread. Is registered. After the state of Tuvalu became the participant of world economic processes, there were usual diseases of the wrong way of life connected with increase in a diet of locals of rice, sugar, canned food and other non-conventional products. Diabetes, hypertension and obesity concern them. Children often have diarrhea, gastroenteritis. The special danger is constituted in recent years by diseases sexually transmitted. Most widely they are widespread among local seamen who work on foreign vessels. They enter into the HIV/AIDS risk group.
At about 20% of the population of Tuvalu, the nematodes, which are activators of afilariatose, are found in an organism.
The disease which is followed by inflammation and obstruction of lymphatic vessels, which results in puffiness and a swelling of surrounding fabrics. According to a census of 2002 of 49% of men and 3% of women of the atoll of Funafuti regularly took various alcoholic beverages. On the remote islands this figure slightly lower, -45% of men and 1% of women.
Smoking is widespread.
2/3 of all male population and 1/4 female population of Funafuti are smokers. On the remote islands -60% and 25% respectively. Education in Tuvalu is obligatory and free for children aged from 6 up to 15 years. The educational system of the country includes several steps. 2-year preschool education, 8-year primary education and 4-year secondary education. In total in Tuvalu 17 preschool educational institutions are registered, control of which is exercised of various parental associations which on own means employ tutors. Historically the government never participated in the organization of activity of these institutions, however in recent years it began to pay them bigger attention. For example, annual grants are paid to 3 qualified tutors from each registered preschool institution. Also other material support directed to improvement of infrastructure and technical equipment is given. At elementary schools children aged from 6 up to 13 years study. After passing a state exam pupils continue training at high school. At the same time school students are granted the right to repeatedly pass examination in case of unsatisfactory assessment. In 2006 at elementary schools studied 2067 person. From them boys -1102 people, girls -965 people. The number of teachers -103 persons. In total 1 high school works in the country. Till their 1998 was 2, one of which was under control of Tuvalu Church. But because of high expenses the church was forced to transfer school to the possession of the government, which in turn decided to close it. After high school further education can be got at Sea School Tuvalu. English Tuvalu Marine School. It is founded in 1978. Training in seamanship. And also at the Yuzhno-Trukiansky University, which campus is located in Funafuti, is conducted. Many foreign states, first of all, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Japan and France, provide substantial assistance to Tuvalu, financing various educational projects of the country. Some teachers improve the skills in foreign educational institutions. Also far. Write comments. Read comments. Interesting people will tell interesting stories. All of good mood and good luck.